The Young and the Restless spoilers. The night sky over Los Angeles burned with a strange electricity, the kind that always seemed to follow the people of Genoa City wherever their hearts led them astray. The neon lights from the boulevard flickered across the tall glass windows of the hotel where Claire and Holden had gone after leaving the shadow room. The air was still thick with the echo of music and the weight of things unsaid. Inside the elevator, silence lingered between them like a third presence, heavy, magnetic, and dangerous. Holden could feel the shift in her breathing, the way her guarded composure had begun to crack after Sharon's unexpected appearance. It wasn't lust that guided the moment so much as confusion, a desperate attempt to drown out the chaos of everything waiting just outside the door. When the elevator doors opened, Claire stepped out first, her heels striking the carpeted floor with a rhythm that betrayed her racing pulse. Holden followed, uncertain whether to speak or to stay silent. He could sense the storm behind her calm expression, something wounded, reckless, and unresolved. When they reached her room, she paused at the door, the key trembling slightly in her hand. Holden placed his hand gently on her shoulder, asking if she was all right. She turned to him, her eyes glassy with emotion, her voice quiet but sharp. "I just don't want to think anymore," she said. There was no accusation, no explanation. Just exhaustion, the kind that made people reach for the nearest flame even if it burned them alive. Inside the room, the city's glow spilled through the window, painting them both in silver and shadow. Holden hesitated, sensing that this moment was standing on the edge between comfort and mistake. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked, his voice low and uncertain. Claire didn't answer right away. She simply looked at him, a thousand memories flickering behind her eyes, of Kyle, of Genoa City, of every choice she had tried to escape and every ghost that had followed her here. Finally, she stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Does this answer your question?" she said softly, and the room seemed to stop breathing. But what she sought in that moment wasn't love, it was oblivion. And what followed wasn't romance but the collapse of restraint, the kind of surrender that comes when someone no longer knows what they're running toward or away from. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, as if the universe itself was bearing witness to another Newman Abbott tragedy in the making. Back in Genoa City, Kyle was sitting alone in the Abbott living room, the faint hum of the fireplace filling the silence. Harrison had long gone to bed, the boy's innocent trust now a memory that only deepened Kyle's loneliness. His phone vibrated on the table. The message came from a private contact? One of the discreet investigators he had hired when he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about Claire's trip to Los Angeles. The text was short, impersonal, and devastating. Subject located: Hotel Royale. Accompanied by Holden. A single photo followed, grainy but unmistakable. It showed Claire and Holden entering the hotel together, their expressions tense but intimate. Kyle's breath caught in his throat. For a long moment, he couldn't move. The world tilted slightly on its axis, and the air felt thin. He stood abruptly, knocking over the coffee mug beside him. The liquid spread across the table like a dark stain. Fury flooded his chest, not just jealousy but betrayal, confusion, heartbreak. He had defended Claire to everyone, to Summer, to Jack, even to himself. He had believed in her when logic told him not to. And now, staring at the evidence, he felt that belief collapse under the weight of reality. He didn't think, didn't plan, he simply moved. Within minutes, he was in his car, the rain streaking across the windshield as he drove toward the airport. The only thought echoing in his mind was why? By the time he reached Los Angeles, dawn was just beginning to break, the sky a bruised gray. He didn't wait to check in or announce his arrival. The investigator had already sent the room number. He rode the elevator in silence, his reflection staring back at him from the mirrored walls. A man driven not by anger alone but by a deep, almost unbearable grief. When the elevator doors opened, he walked down the hall with the precision of someone marching toward a battlefield. Each step echoed in the corridor, each second stretching out like an eternity. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. The door gave way with a single shove, slamming against the wall as he entered the room. The sound startled the air into silence. What he saw froze him where he stood, not because of shock, but because of what it confirmed. There was no pretense left, no lies to shield anyone anymore. Holden turned sharply, startled but unashamed. Claire's eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing in something almost like defiance. She didn't rush to cover her guilt or offer an explanation. Instead, she stared at him as if daring him to speak. "Kyle," she said finally, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "What are you doing here?" The question was absurd, and she knew it. He didn't answer. His eyes, dark and hollow, moved between them, searching for any trace of the woman he thought he knew. Holden stepped forward, his tone defensive, trying to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, but the words fell flat. Nothing he could say would erase what Kyle had already seen. Claire's anger flared, brittle and sharp, her emotions twisting into something she didn't fully understand. "You think you can just barge in here and play the hero," she snapped. "You don't get to control me, Kyle." The words hit him harder than she expected. He stared at her, his face pale, his voice low. "Control you," he repeated. "I trusted you." But before he could say more, she interrupted, her voice rising, trembling. "You never trusted me. You just wanted to believe you could save me. But you can't even save yourself." Her words were a blade. And when she followed it with a bitter laugh, calling him a coward, a man too afraid to fight for what he wanted, the blow cut even deeper. "You're a coward, Kyle. A scared little boy hiding behind family names and excuses." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't stop. She wanted to hurt him, maybe because it was easier than facing her own guilt. Kyle took a slow step back, his jaw tightening. He could have shouted. He could have broken something. But instead, his voice came out quiet, steady, almost eerily calm. "You're right," he said. "I did want to save you. Because I thought there was something left worth saving." His gaze drifted toward Holden, who stood frozen near the window, guilt written across his face. "But maybe I was wrong about both of you." For a long, unbearable moment, the three of them stood in silence, the room heavy with the kind of pain that leaves no words behind. Claire's anger faltered, replaced by something raw, fear, regret, maybe both. But it was too late. Kyle turned and walked out without another word. The sound of the door closing was final, echoing through the hollow space of what used to be love. After he left, Claire sank to the floor, the adrenaline fading, the reality sinking in. Holden tried to speak, but she raised a trembling hand to stop him. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Just go." He hesitated, then did as she asked, leaving her alone in the half-lit room. Outside, the early morning sun crept through the blinds, illuminating the fragments of a night that had changed everything. Back in Genoa City, the Abbott mansion felt emptier than ever. Harrison woke to find his father gone and his message to Claire still unread. The innocence of his small hope, that the people he loved would somehow find their way back to each other, was something no one had the heart to shatter. For Kyle, the flight home was a blur. He didn't sleep, didn't eat. He stared out the window, watching the clouds drift past like ghosts. His phone buzzed once, a message from Summer, "Are you okay?" He didn't reply. How could he explain a heartbreak that felt older than himself? And in Los Angeles, Claire stood by the hotel window hours later, staring out at the endless city below. She touched her phone, the unread message from Kyle still glowing on the screen, a photo of him and Harrison smiling under paper pig noses. Her breath hitched. For the first time that night, she realized what she had truly lost. The hotel corridors of Los Angeles had never known silence like this. The kind that follows a storm before another one begins. The morning sun had climbed just high enough to stain the windows with gold, but inside the Royale, the air was thick with tension and the lingering echo of raised voices. Claire still stood where Kyle had left her, the remnants of fury and guilt battling inside her chest like two wild creatures refusing to die. She could still hear the echo of his last words, still feel the weight of his stare, and even now, part of her hated that it hurt. She told herself she didn't care, that Kyle had no right to her heart, but the lie tasted bitter. Holden had left hours ago, promising to give her space, yet his cologne lingered faintly, a reminder of decisions that couldn't be undone. She pressed her palms to her face, wishing she could scrub away the memory, but the knock on the door broke the illusion. She froze. For a heartbeat, she thought Kyle had come back, that he'd returned for one more argument, one more round. But when she opened the door, the world shifted again. Victoria Newman stood there, her expression caught somewhere between heartbreak and fury. "Mom?" Claire whispered, disbelief flooding her voice. She hadn't expected this. Not her mother, not now. But Victoria didn't wait for permission. She walked in, her presence commanding the room the way only a Newman could. The sight of her daughter's disheveled state, the half-packed suitcase, the stillness of the air told her everything. She had known something was wrong from the moment she couldn't reach Claire the night before. But seeing the aftermath of choices that could ruin reputations, relationships, and lives, it was almost too much. Victoria's tone was sharp, every syllable laced with the kind of control she had spent years perfecting. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she demanded. Claire stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "I don't need a lecture." But Victoria didn't stop. "This isn't about a lecture. This is about you throwing away everything, your integrity, your future, your peace, for someone who doesn't even know who he is." The accusation hit hard, but it wasn't entirely untrue. Holden was a mystery even to himself, a man with charm but shadows where his truth should be. Claire turned away, clenching her fists. "It's my life," she said. "My choices." Her voice trembled, but her conviction didn't. Victoria exhaled, her composure cracking for the first time. She wasn't just angry, she was afraid. "You don't see it, do you?" she said quietly. "You're repeating every mistake I ever made. Every time I thought I was in control, every time I believed I could fix a man who didn't want to be fixed, it always ended the same way." Claire's shoulders tensed. The words stung not because they were harsh, but because they were true. But this wasn't the moment for reflection or understanding. The fragile bond between mother and daughter was about to fracture beyond repair. When Claire turned back to face her mother, her eyes were wet with frustration, her voice breaking. "I'm not you," she said, the words sharp as glass. "I'm not living your regrets. I don't need your approval to decide who I am." Victoria took a step closer, her voice trembling with a mixture of love and despair. "This isn't about approval. It's about survival." But Claire's patience had run dry. The exhaustion, the guilt, the pressure, it all erupted at once. "Then maybe I don't want to survive like you do," she shouted. "Maybe I want to live even if it's messy, even if it hurts." The silence that followed was thunderous. Victoria's eyes softened, the anger fading into something far more painful, sorrow. For a moment, she saw not the defiant woman before her but the little girl she used to hold, the daughter she used to protect. "Claire," she began, but the plea died on her tongue. Claire's voice shook as she screamed, "Just get out. Leave me alone. Let me deal with this my way." The words echoed off the walls, and for the first time, Victoria obeyed. She turned toward the door slowly, her heart splintering with every step. Before leaving, she paused, her voice low but steady. "You can push me away, but one day you'll realize, some choices don't just cost you love. They cost you yourself." The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was unbearable. Claire sank to the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. Everything was spiraling, every decision unraveling faster than she could catch it. And then, as if the universe refused to give her a moment's peace, another sound shattered the stillness. Heavy footsteps. The door slammed open with such force that it hit the wall. Kyle was back. He looked different now, not broken like before, but burning. His eyes were wild, his breath uneven, his anger sharpened into something dangerous. Holden was behind him, having followed in a desperate attempt to explain. The moment their eyes met, the air turned electric. Claire stood abruptly, her heart pounding. "Kyle, don't," she said, but he didn't listen. He stepped toward Holden, his fists clenched, every muscle in his body tense. "You think you can touch what's mine," he hissed, his voice low and shaking. Holden raised his hands defensively, his tone calm but strained. "Kyle, you don't understand." But he didn't get to finish. Kyle lunged, and only Claire's quick movement stopped him from landing the first blow. "Stop it," she shouted, pushing between them. Her words barely reached him. The rage in Kyle's eyes wasn't just jealousy, it was heartbreak weaponized. "He played you," he said, his voice cracking. "And you let him." Holden's patience snapped. "That's enough," he barked, but Kyle was past reasoning. The confrontation had turned into something primal, something far beyond words. In the chaos, Kyle's hand brushed against the nightstand, where a pocketknife, left open from a delivery earlier, gleamed faintly in the morning light. He grabbed it without thinking, his pulse racing. Claire's scream tore through the room. "Kyle, don't," she cried, reaching for him. For a single, terrifying heartbeat, the entire world froze. The knife trembled in his grasp, the blade catching the sunlight as if mocking the fragility of the moment. His chest heaved, his mind spinning between rage and reason. Then, just as quickly, something inside him broke. He dropped the knife. The metallic clatter against the floor rang louder than any shout. He stumbled back, his breath ragged, the enormity of what almost happened crashing down on him like a wave. Claire stood frozen, her tears spilling freely now. Holden moved instinctively, catching her by the arm, but she pulled away. Her gaze locked on Kyle, who stood in the middle of the room, pale, shaking, and empty. For the first time in their tangled history, Kyle looked utterly lost. "What are we doing?" he whispered, his voice raw. "What have we become?" No one answered. There were no words left, only consequences. Claire's anger dissolved into something quieter, guilt, sorrow, confusion. Holden said nothing, his eyes darting between them, realizing that whatever this was, he had just stepped into the center of a storm that wasn't his to fight. When Kyle finally turned to leave, no one stopped him. The sound of the door closing behind him was the sound of something ending. Love, trust, maybe even sanity. Claire sank to her knees, the weight of everything pressing down until she could barely breathe. Outside, the sky had cleared, the city resuming its indifferent hum. But inside that hotel room, time had stopped. Victoria was waiting in the lobby, pacing restlessly, her phone in hand but her resolve gone. When she saw Kyle emerge, pale and silent, her heart sank. She didn't ask what happened, she already knew. Some tragedies didn't need words to explain them. She only murmured, almost to herself, "I should have stopped this sooner." Kyle didn't reply. He walked past her, through the revolving doors, into the sharp light of morning. Behind him, Victoria stood still, the mother of the storm now forced to watch its aftermath. Upstairs, Claire sat alone by the window, staring down at the city she no longer recognized. Somewhere in that endless sprawl, her mother was broken, Kyle was shattered, and she, the one who set it all in motion, didn't know how to put any of it back together. Outside, the world moved on. But for the Newmans and the Abbotts, Los Angeles had just become another battlefield, and the scars left behind would follow them all the way home.